The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a diversity educator and a core alignment coach, and I offer trainings on how to identify biases so that we can step out of patterns of bias that impact other people negatively, which actually impacts all of us negatively, and to create more inclusive patterns of behavior and belonging, which makes everyone happier. If you're interested in seeing any programs that I offer or in how I tailor trainings to different organizations, you can go to my website, which is knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. So today my guest is Deema Tamini, and I didn't ask you if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Deema, please come on out. Did I say your name correctly?
Close. It's just Deema Tamimi. 2 M's.
Tamimi.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I apologize for that.
Nice.
So I would like to tell people you have such an interesting professional background. So I could have asked you to be on the show for about 10 different reasons that I know of right now.
I'm interested in a lot of things, and I've done a lot of things, so.
Yeah. And I just want to know that the title that we chose based on one of your interests is called Food Could Be What Brings Us Together. And if I can just read a little bit more about what you do and why that is the title for this show, I just want to let folks know that you're an entrepreneur, a creative maker, community builder, and sustainable and communal food advocate who embraces fairness, peace, love, and happiness. You're very creative, driven, empathic. This is also what, how other people who've interviewed you have written that you're a force in both the tech industry and the local Davis community. With a rich background in product management, digital strategy, and growth marketing, Deema has made her mark at tech giants like Microsoft, Google, Flipboard, Unity, and Figma. But her passion doesn't stop at technology. She's deeply committed to community building and sustainable food systems and has applied her skills and learnings from tech career to all of these endeavors. So in 2016, you decided to get more involved in your local community and foster a passion of hers, which is sustainable and equitable food systems, as well as community building and resiliency. And you joined a local group called Because Yolo, which is focused on social justice and political change, and started a gardening and food sharing app called Giving Garden. So I'm so curious about the app. Is that a
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the first project that I started working on when I took a step away from a sort of grueling tech career. I ended up going back to that tech career, but in that time frame, it was about a 3-year time frame. I was doing some consulting for tech, but I also was interested in using technology in the food space, and so Giving Garden was that project, and it was an app that helped people figure out what to grow in their community using public data about weather and the environment. as well as helping people share produce with one another. So I'm very interested in reducing food waste. So this was part of the thinking behind that, was that, rather than waste because you have too much cucumbers and you might have too little tomatoes, you can trade and just share with your neighbors. So that was Giving Garden. And that was sort of my first foray into working outside of sort of my not 9 to 5 in tech, but my full-time tech job. Yeah. And then that kind of drew me into a lot of other things around food in Davis, in Yolo County, which I ended up feeling were not really tech oriented necessarily, but more community and social justice oriented. And so I ended up starting a nonprofit called Land and Ladle, which allowed me and others to work on programs that were educational and also helps gather people together around food, which is where I found I had even more passion around than necessarily the app or the technology.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So can you say more about Land and Ladle?
Yeah. So Land and Ladle is a nonprofit. It has been since I went back to tech during the right when COVID hit, I went back to tech and sort of had a little bit of a safe harbor because a lot of the funding that Land and Ladle would have received sort of became tied up in a lot of people were there was kind of a freeze on a lot of funding to more nonprofit-y type programs especially because a lot of the funding that I would have received would have come from the UC system. And
Let's slow down a little bit so that the ASL interpretation can follow our pace more closely.
sounds good. Will do.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. So when COVID came around, I started to look at going back into technology and working in the tech sector just as a way to kind of weather the storm that hit a lot of funding in more of the nonprofit sector. But prior to that, I was definitely building out Land and Ladle, and it was focused on a number of different things, but really bringing people together and learning about sustainable and equitable food systems, also doing events to bring people together around food. So we did an event called the Streetery. We partnered with the Davis Food Co-op, which was like a food truck event, but also all of the vendors used sustainable practices. I mean, that was kind of part of, you saw in the branding, was an effort to do these events as sustainably as possible, and also make an opportunity for people who don't have a restaurant to be able to be part of the food economy. It can be very hard to get the startup money to run a restaurant. So food trucks and pop-ups are an avenue for people to be able to be part of the food economy. And so that was a part of what Land and Ladle was doing, was trying to bring on events like that. As well as just purely educational events. We did a couple of events, one on food waste, where we had speakers from all kind of sectors of what you would consider thinking about food waste. We had academics speaking about it, all the way up to people who put fridges in front yards and people can put food in them and people can come and grab food. And that organization is called Freege. Night Market was another organization that had some presence there, and they're an organization in Davis that essentially gathers food at the end of the night from restaurants, and then makes it so that there isn't a stigma around it. They create a fun space for people to come, listen to music, and eat that food, or take that food home. So we had people like that, all the way to folks that were working on more innovative ways of dealing with composting, and ensuring less greenhouse gases and methods of doing that. So there was a lot of, we did it from every way that you could think about food waste. We tried to cover that. We also did a really great one on the microbiome, and we had people all the way from thinking about it from the soil all the way to the gut, and thinking about microbiome, which is a really interesting and untapped, I think, area to be studied. And so we did those events, and what was really nice about them is we saw people from all walks of life coming to those events. Especially in Davis, sometimes the events are only students or only residents or only young people or only old people, but it was a broad range. We had students and residents, and we packed the house on both of those events. So those were some of the kinds of things that Land and Ladle was doing during its kind of sort of heyday. And I'm hoping now, I have stepped back now after going back to tech for 4 years. I've stepped back to start thinking about going back to working in more either in food or in social justice. I'm still working out what that will be. But if really in both cases, I think they'll probably be, I see them tied together. I see that Land and Ladle could be really the center of how I bring all that work together.
Wow. So, gosh, I want to talk about fridge and night market and the is it microbiome? Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. So the fridge is like, for example, the refrigerator in front of the Davis Food Co-op. That's
Yeah,
where
that's a fridge. That's one of the
fridge.
fridges. Yeah.
Okay. And anyone can leave food there, or
People can
anyone
leave
can
food
take food
there.
there. Is that actual
Yes,
refrigerator
people
else?
can leave and take. I think this is something that has been, popping up in areas kind of all around the country and all around the world. In fact, there was someone at UC Davis, Ernst, who was a friend of mine, and now he's now back in Brazil. He's from Brazil, and he started the first fridge there, and then started the nonprofit that was doing it here in Davis. But there are other groups that do similar things. But essentially, it is, what it sounds like. It's usually a smaller refrigerator on either a public piece of property or somebody who's willing to let it sit in their property, and people will put things in there and others can come and grab it. And in some cases there's a little bit of a community around it, and people will either, whether it's like a WhatsApp group or a Instagram group or something, but people will write, hey, I just dropped off a bunch of peaches, or people will know that they can go and get that
Mm.
food.
And was the night market, like, one thing I couldn't quite picture is, did that venue change?
The venue for the night market?
Yeah.
I think that it's generally been in Central Park, as far as
Okay.
I know. But I think it can potentially move around. I don't know what they're doing right now in terms of if they're moving to different spaces, but I believe it's been in Central Park, at least in the beginning. That's where it was. And a lot of the people who gather the food will gather the food on bicycles. It's very Davis. So they have bike carts and they go to the various locations, and there's restaurants who are regularly donating, so they kind of know where to go and who, which groups of people to ask, and then they go and they pick it up and have this regular fun occasion where people can come. And I think I just recently heard that there are some families that have been volunteering there, and and it's meant to be a fun environment. That was kind of the whole premise of it, was keep it fun so that there isn't the stigma around needing the food.
That's brilliant. It's true. If you're just having fun and socializing and talking and gathering, then a stigma need not arise, or can
Exactly.
dissolve away the second you realize you're not alone there,
Yep.
and other people are eating there and laughing and talking, and it's a
Yeah.
social event. And
It creates community. It is fun. Food is very good at that. That's the other thing. It's, the fact that you can stick around and eat with other people. Um, that's where food, I think, just it's very powerful in that way. People like to eat. They have to eat, but they also like to eat. And doing it with others is a lot of fun, turns out.
It is. I wanted to we don't have to wait till the end of the show, but I want people, I want you to share now, like your vision. I think you were asked something one time, like, what do you want for the world? And you had a vision about sharing food. Can you just kind of paint that picture for us now?
Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting. I've thought for a long time that food could be something that could bring people together around some of the biggest disagreements that people have. And there are others who have definitely, like, many people have thought of this, and there are, in fact, organizations that have done some interesting things. I don't know if this organization still exists, but a while ago there was an organization called Conflict Kitchen that brought people together, often potentially on different sides of a conflict, or just to sort of, have a meal, but be able to talk about something that might cause people discomfort. And so I've always thought that that could be a way of, especially right now, we are in an extremely divisive time in history, on many, many topics, especially, world conflicts. And um, I have felt that food can be an avenue into at least bringing people together. I will say I have, uh, you know, at times thought that was a little naive, and I've questioned whether I'm, being too simplistic about it. And I'd say in some of the darkest moments for me, I have thought this is not going to solve anything. And these topics are too difficult to
Mm.
expect food to really do anything. Um, but since those times, I have started to believe that it's actually one of the ways where you can, maybe in more of a sort of long game kind of way of thinking, start to change narratives around people, start to change stereotypes,
Mm.
and shift people's perspectives. It won't happen necessarily in that single meal, but as you sit with someone with a very different perspective, or from a group that maybe you have some stereotypical thinking about, it plants a seed, and it plants a seed for rethinking, maybe, and maybe being more open-minded, and maybe even then going and trying to cook some of the food from that area. And when you do that, you might learn about that culture and start to maybe unlearn some of the stereotypes and biases that you had. It's not the fast fix, but it is, I think I still have a belief that it can be part of fixing some of the divisiveness that we have, around several topics, and including conflicts.
Wow, I love the image, and let's not let go of it.
It's
And
not.
the whole concept, and that's what we need is long-term, planting seeds and cultivating new pathways, and that's a beautiful way to build one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about what I did during those 3 years where I was, sort of building up more of a presence in the food space. A lot of it was meals, bringing people together around meals, even if it was, sometimes it was just you were watching, a talk about food waste or the microbiome, but we would always have food. Co-op was amazing and often donated food, and we would always have people sort of mingling afterwards, and it brought people together in a way that maybe wouldn't have come together uh, on their own, right?
Mhm,
But they found a common
definitely.
interest, and I think those are the opportunities where you start to create. You do create opportunities for just getting maybe just chipping away at some of the divisive thinking.
Chipping away at some of the divisive thinking. Yes, that's great. Well, speaking of that, before we take our break, I just wanna simply acknowledge that today is September 11th, and as honored all the families and all the victims. We lost over 3,000 Americans, and it was a huge shock and tragedy in 2001, 23 years ago. And there is so much to know about it. And was really, my son was born not shortly before that. There's so many, his generation, so many people don't really know what happened. And this isn't the program to describe it, but I just want to honor the families and the victims and recognize that it still has, grief doesn't go away very easily when you lose somebody. So we're thinking about all the families and how it's impacted the country, our policies, so many parts of our population. And so I'll just be quiet now and let that lead us into our break.
Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing loudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Reach across our borders. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna end the occupation. End the occupation. End the occupation. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna stop this war together. Stop this war together. Stop this war together. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Keep on moving forward. Never turning back. Never turning back. Never turning back.
Thank you. I want to thank our engineer Rebel for hanging in there, because there are storms coming where she is, and she's hanging in the studio, and we want you to be safe. So thank you for hanging in today. So Deema, I am curious about your you were talking about focusing more on social justice. I mean, to me, it sounds like no matter what you're doing,
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
social justice is the central theme, and you
Yeah.
bring a lot of and I mean it, a brilliant creativity. Like it takes some brilliance to like have a vision and pursue it and collaborate and thinking of all these different ways that to make food accessible to more and more people. And I just curious if you can add or say, share with us what you're doing in the humans relations committee, which is I think something you recently became a part of.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the end of, I guess I always say the end of the year, but I think of it in school year because in Davis, everything's based on the students. And so at the end of the spring last year, I applied to be part of the Human Relations Commission in Davis for the city of Davis, and then the way that that works is you are interviewed and either recommended or not to be on the commission, and so I was recommended to be on the commission, and my commission term started July 1. We've only had a couple of meetings. Um, my interest in being on that commission, really the goal of the commission, there are a couple, that are very specific, but in a more general way, kind of meant to be a place or a group of people that are doing the work to understand what the climate is within the community around, hate crimes, discrimination. Um, to be a listener in terms of every month people can come and speak about anything that they have experienced, whether it's that they feel unwelcome or positive things around belonging in their community. And there are some other things that the commission has on their plate in terms of also working on some specific events that the city does that are around Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Cesar Chavez. So there are a couple of events that we also help organize. One of the reasons why I was interested in joining the commission, or there's many reasons. My background sort of seems so many of the things I've done in community have led up to doing something like this. I've worked on a number of political campaigns within the city, and worked with some of our city council members on their campaigns, and worked in a variety of efforts to increase belonging and feeling of belonging in the community. And so it made a lot of sense. A lot of my food work was meant to sort of create spaces where people can come together and feel welcome with one another. And then another thing that was maybe a kind of a driving force around it. One was also that I had in February decided to leave my sort of full-time tech career and explore options that would likely allow me to do more in the community and open up time for me to do things like a commission. And then the other was what's been going on domestically in relation to the Israel-Gaza war has very much torn up the Davis community, and created a lot of strife, anxiety, unraveling of trauma, or not unraveling, but the bringing up of trauma for a lot of people. And I felt very much like there needed to be some representation, and just to 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 put it out there. I am half Egyptian and half Palestinian. I'm also married to a Jewish man who has ties to Israel. So I feel like I can bring a very unique perspective, but also a perspective that's very much uh, informed by an understanding of trauma, and having spoken in the past on with people on both sides of this, I wanted to be able to also be someone that can bring some balanced perspective, but also be someone who could allow people to feel more comfortable in the community who have not felt comfortable, especially Palestinian Americans and Arab Americans who have not had it be a normalized thing for them to complain, to come and say that something has happened to them. So I wanted to make sure that there was somebody on the commission that they could relate to in some ways, and feel some representation there and be able to speak their mind. And so that was one of the reasons that I did apply to be on the commission, and it was part of my application. I did note that as part of the application, and I think, and I hope that not only the people, the residents in our community, but the students in our community who have experienced a lot of discrimination, and especially for speaking out about their beliefs about Israel. And I'm hoping to give them a space where they can open up about what they've experienced, both on campus and in the community. Because Davis, we like to say that we love the students being here, and then sometimes it seems like we say that, but then we don't actually take their what they're experiencing to heart, because we think, well, they're going to leave. But really, we should be creating a space that's welcome to everybody, including our students who are here, whether they're here and then they're leaving, or here and hopefully we create such a space that they want to stay.
Mm. Well, gosh, that takes a lot of courage. And I want to just like touch on what you said about students first, and then and a couple of other things. But it's interesting how what we do, even in high school, not just university level, we tell students, we've been through it ourselves when we were students, of being told in these educational institutions, this is for learning, it's for critical thinking, it's for growth, it's for growth mindset. And then when they start really doing it and digging into things that aren't in our curriculums, or our country hasn't reconciled with yet, boy, do we slam them back. Um, and
I saw a lot of
I'm
that.
sure a lot of people are, making analogies to, the Vietnam protests, and nothing is easy. There's so much pain, and I really appreciate that you said trauma.
Mm.
So much trauma is being triggered all around, and there's more that it's more than both sides. There's many sides. So much pain, and it's very difficult to navigate these conversations, particularly around what's happening in Gaza, between Gaza and Israel. And I really appreciate you making space on the city commission for people of Palestinian or Egyptian or Arab heritage to be able to feel like they can also share their pain, while Davis is also trying to be mindful of the reality of like we can hold both truths. Anti-Semitism is also horrible, on the rise. There are people in this city who are terrified, who are Jewish, people in this city who are terrified, who are Palestinian or other Arabs, and there's such a spectrum of both.
Yeah, I think that that's part of what is sort of really been painful to watch, is that it seems to unfold in this way that one is against the other. That if you say that you have experienced anti-Palestinian treatment, that you are somehow anti-Semitic for simply saying that you got that treatment. And then on the flip side, it's the same. I've seen that happen with people who are speaking about valid anti-Semitism that they've experienced or seen, and there being this sort of trigger reaction of like, sort of, diminishing it because, oh, well, that means that you don't care about Palestine. These are they can both be real. They can
Yes.
both be truly problematic things that we need to focus on. And there is trauma on both sides.
Absolutely.
And I think that people, in many cases, because of the trauma that they have, sometimes are not able to see that. And, because it's so emotionally charged that it becomes an us versus them paradigm. When in reality, these two things can exist and should both be dealt with in order to create a welcoming space for both Jews and Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians and everyone else. That's what we should be having in Davis. And Davis has often been, or at least thinks of itself as, a very progressive place that is a place for everyone to belong. But I think that on both sides, people aren't feeling that. And I say sides, meaning I think there are Jewish people in the community, as well as Arabs and Palestinians and Muslims in the community, that do not feel like Davis has been a place or has been welcoming to them, especially as things unfolded after October 7th.
So sadly true. People are being targeted on all the sides that you just mentioned, are like literally actually being targeted and terrified in Davis.
Yeah.
From all those different heritages you mentioned. And it's so painful. And I'm real again, I really appreciate these kind of conversations and your courage, because I liked it the term you use about normalizing. Is that what you said? Normalizing Palestinian
Yeah, I
ability to
mean,
talk about their own suffering and trying to be understood as like, this is not against anybody else. We're just trying to tell our untold stories.
yeah, I think Palestinian Americans have been silenced for many, many years, or have, I think they've just been silenced. There's been enough, as somebody growing up as a Palestinian American, it was very clear to me that my voice in this matter was not welcome. In some cases, even just saying I was Palestinian was threatening to people, and so many have learned to be quiet. I also think culturally, there is a desire not to be labeled a victim or even calling ourselves victims. And in general, just there has been, anti-Arab discrimination and anti-Arab sentiment in the United States for years. And because of that, I think there is a much less likelihood that an Arab or a Palestinian will come forward, and Muslims as well, will come forward with these complaints that you see from other groups, where it has become more normal to do so. It has become very acceptable, and we really clamor around those people and welcome them, especially in progressive areas of the country. But it hasn't historically happened for Arabs and Palestinians, and Muslims, and so that keeps those groups in many cases very quiet, and so I think it's underreported. Not only the overt sort of racism, but also you just did something on microaggressions. There's a lot of microaggressions that we have to deal with, every day of our lives. And it's kind of unacceptable to talk about it. I think it's starting to become more acceptable, but for years, people have been trained to just deal with it, just go to work, deal with the microaggressions, deal with the overt racism, deal with the fact that, the media has a very one-sided view of things. And you just learn to sort of deal with it. And I think that's starting to change a little bit. I think there's a younger generation of Arab Americans and Palestinian Americans who are starting to voice their opinions more. I personally have been inspired by some of those people because that's not how I was when I was, a teenager and in college. Instead, I just sort of internalized a lot of that, and really, it was really more in my late 30s and early 40s where I started to just very recently started to really unpack that and deal with that silencing.
Well, thank you for doing that. And you're right. Anybody who's seen my consulting work knows that I really strongly encourage everyone to interrupt microaggressions when you hear them, to not walk by them or sweep them under the rug. And we did have a local event recently where we practice real horrible microaggressions that happen not just in Davis. I've lived in a lot of different parts of this country and the world. They happen all over the place that I've been, and in Davis.
Everywhere.
And I like the way you make a distinction between, Arabs, Palestinians, and Muslims, because there's so many different kinds of Jewish people, right? There's different Jewish sects. There's Orthodox. There's secular. There's not religious. There's different political views. Same with Arabs, right? We have Christians, non-Christians. My father was Druze. We have so many. Like
Yeah.
anytime, I said this with my guest who's going to be on next week. We had a great conversation yesterday. Anytime anybody says the blank, the Arabs, the Jews, the blacks, and we just can't take it anymore. I mean,
Mhm.
that's why we need to learn how to interrupt Mike and say, "Oh, what do you mean by that? How
Yeah.
many people do you know from that group? What's that based on? Where did you learn that?" We can educate each other so much more easily than was permitted before.
Yeah. It's true.
And
That's been good to see a shift in that direction.
wow, gosh, you're bringing a lot to the city. Thank you so much. We have 5 more minutes, and I just want to make sure if you have any additional thoughts or um, before we have to wrap up. I wanted to give you a minute to think about that.
I think, going back to food, I do think that as we think about, like, the silencing, I do think as much as I had that sort of dark moment that I mentioned where I thought, "Oh, this isn't food isn't gonna do this." But when it comes to I do think that the thing that food can do, is potentially work on exactly that, the silencing. I think it is, like, one of the first steps for people to be able to kind of will say that they're Palestinian even, is
Mm,
through food. Like, no people love to like, hear about new recipes and new foods, and again, it's sometimes it feels like a little bit of, a way of getting not doing the really tough stuff, but I think you can do those things. I think that protests are important, and I think, that there are lots of ways to do social justice work, but I think one of the ways, and especially for those who are afraid, food is a way to share your culture, and I encourage people who are feeling afraid or can't really, either say that they're Palestinian, they can at least start by sharing, food experiences and share their food with people. And I hope that that then takes them to a place where they can talk about justice, and they can, go to their city council and say what they need to say. And they can go to their human relations commissions that are, in almost all cities, and say what they need to about what they're experiencing. And if you need to start with food, that's a great start. But it can help you get through feeling silenced.
wow, that feels like medicine.
Food is
It's
medicine.
It's true. It's like it's a safe way to share when that like if you and definitely identify with this. If there's nothing else I can say about my own mixed heritage and being half Lebanese, I can like bring tabbouleh over or some and that way of like exposing like that part of myself,
Yeah.
but not having to anybody have to get tense or afraid
Exactly.
or wow. Thank you so much, Deema. Food is an opening. Food
It
is a
is.
way to connect and open doors. Thank you so much for like all of your great work.
Thanks.
I want to also thank our ASL interpreter, Kenneth Arnold. Thank you so much for your patience and always showing up and preparing. And I want to thank our engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean Piper. And I would like to thank our sponsors for this program, which this program is brought to you by the City of Davis Arts and Cultural Affairs Program and the California Creative Corps, a pilot program funded by the City of Sacramento's Office of Arts and Culture and the California Arts Council, a state agency, as an engagement campaign designed to increase public awareness about issues of social justice, climate resiliency, and more. The Creative Corps program, backed by Governor Gavin Newsom and the state legislature, looks to increase public awareness on topics such as health and safety, water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, emergency preparedness, social justice, and civic and community engagement. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Talk4 TV or w4cy.com, and may we all continue to have enriching conversations and diversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate